نستغفر الله نسألك الجنة ونعوذ بك من النار. اللهم إنك عفو تحب العفو فاعف عنا. اللهم إنك عفو تحب العفو فاعف عنا. اللهم إنك عفو تحب العفو فاعف عنا يا كريم. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله نستغفر الله نسألك الجنة ونعوذ بك من النار. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله نستغفر الله نسألك الجنة ونعوذ بك من النار. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله نستغفر الله نسألك الجنة ونعوذ بك من النار. اللهم إنك عفو تحب العفو فاعف عنا. اللهم إنك عفو تحب العفو فاعف عنا. اللهم إنك عفو تحب العفو فاعف عنا يا كريم. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله نستغفر الله نسألك الجنة ونعوذ بك من النار. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله نستغفر الله نسألك الجنة ونعوذ بك من النار. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله نستغفر الله نسألك الجنة ونعوذ بك من النار. الله
الذين آمنوا وتطمئن قلوبهم بذكر الله لا بذكر الله تطمئن القلوب. أفضل الذكر فاعلم أنه لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله. لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله. لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله. لا إله إلا 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 الله. الله 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 لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله. لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله. لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وصحبه وسلم. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إذا وقعت الواقعة ليس لوقعتها كاذبة خافضة رافعة. إذا رجت الأرض رجا وبست الجبال بسا فكانت هباء منبثا وكنتم أزواجا ثلاثة. فأصحاب الميمنة ما أصحاب الميمنة وأصحاب المشأمة ما أصحاب المشأمة. والسابقون السابقون أولئك المقربون في جنات النعيم. ثلة من الأولين وقليل من الآخرين على سرر موضونة متكئين عليها متقابلين. يطوف عليهم ولدان مخلدون بأكواب وأباريق وكأس من معين لا يصدعون عنها ولا ينزفون. وفاكهة مما يتخيرون ولحم طير مما يشتهون. وحور عين كأمثال اللؤلؤ المكنون جزاء بما كانوا يعملون. لا يسمعون فيها لغوا ولا تأثيما إلا قيلا سلاما سلاما. وأصحاب اليمين ما أصحاب اليمين في سدر مخضود وطلح منضود وظل ممدود وماء مسكوب. وفاكهة كثيرة لا مقطوعة ولا ممنوعة وفرش مرفوعة. إنا أنشأناهن إنشاء وجعلناهن أبكارا عربا أترابا لأصحاب اليمين. ثلة من الأولين وثلة من الآخرين. وأصحاب الشمال ما أصحاب الشمال في سموم وحميم حميم وظل من يحموم لا بارد ولا كريم إنهم كانوا قبل ذلك مترفين وكانوا يصرون على الحنث العظيم وكانوا يقولون أئذا متنا وكنا ترابا وعظاما إنا لمبعوثون أو آباؤنا الأولون قل إن الأولين والآخرين لمجموعون إلى ميقات يوم معلوم ثم إنكم أيها الضالون المكذبون لآكلون من شجر من زقوم فمالئون منها البطون فشاربون عليه من الحميم فشاربون شرب الهيم هذا نزلهم يوم الدين نحن خلقناكم فلولا تصدقون أفرأيتم ما تمنون أنتم تخلقونه أم نحن الخالقون نحن قدرنا بينكم الموت وما نحن بمسبوقين على أن نبدل أمثالكم وننشئكم فيما لا تعلمون ولقد علمتم النشأة الأولى فلولا تذكرون أفرأيتم ما تحرثون أنتم تزرعونه أم نحن الزارعون لو نشاء لجعلناه حطاما فظلتم تفكهون إنا لمغرمون بل نحن محرومون أفرأيتم الماء الذي تشربون أنتم أنزلتموه من المزن أم نحن المنزلون لو نشاء جعلناه أجاجا فلولا تشكرون أفرأيتم النار التي تورون أنتم أنشأتم شجرتها أم نحن المنشئون نحن جعلناها تذكرة ومتاعا للمقوين فسبح باسم ربك العظيم فلا أقسم بمواقع النجوم وإنه لقسم لو تعلمون عظيم إنه لقرآن كريم في كتاب مكنون لا يمسه إلا المطهرون تنزيل من رب العالمين أفبهذا الحديث أنتم مدينون وتجعلون رزقكم أنكم تكذبون فلولا إذا بلغت الحلقوم وأنتم حينئذ تنظرون ونحن أقرب إليه منكم ولكن لا تبصرون فلولا إن كنتم غير مدينين ترجعونها إن كنتم صادقين فأما إن كان من المقربين فروح وريحان وجنة نعيم وأما إن كان من أصحاب اليمين فسلام لك من أصحاب اليمين وأما إن كان من المكذبين الضالين فنزل من حميم وتصلية جحيم إن هذا لهو حق اليقين فسبح باسم ربك العظيم سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده اللهم صن وجوهنا باليسار ولا تهنا بالإقتار فنسترزق طالبي رزقك ونستعطف شرار خلقك ونشتغل بحمد من أعطانا ونبتلى بذنب من منعنا وأنت من وراء ذلك كله أهل العطاء والمنع اللهم كما صنت وجوهنا عن السجود إلا لك فصنا عن الحاجة إلا إليك بجودك وكرمك وفضلك يا أرحم الراحمين يا أرحم الراحمين يا أرحم الراحمين اغننا بفضلك عمن سواك وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وهب لنا به صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم من رزقك الحلال الطيب المبارك ما تصون به وجوهنا عن التعرض إلى أحد من خلقك واجعل اللهم لنا إليه طريقا سهلا من غير فتنة ولا محنة ولا منة ولا تبية لأحد وجنبنا اللهم الحرام حيث كان وأين كان وعند من كان وحل بيننا وبين أهله وقبض عنا أيديهم واصرف عنا وجوههم وقلوبهم حتى لا نتقلب إلا فيما يرضيك ولا نستعين بنعمتك إلا فيما تحبه وترضاه برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين اللهم إن كان رزقنا في السماء فأنزله وإن كان في الأرض فأخرج وإن كان معسرا فيسر وإن كان بعيدا فقرب وإن كان حراما فطهر وإن قال قليلا فكثر وإن كان معدوما فأوجد وإن كان موقوفا فأجره وإن كان ذنبا فاغفر وإن كان سيئة فامحها وإن كان عثرة فأقلها وبارك لنا في جميع ذلك إنك ملك مقتدر وما تشاء من أمر يكون يا من إذا أراد شيئا إنما يقول له كن فيكون سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين في كل لحظة أبدا عدد خلقه ورضا نفسه وزنة عرشه ومداد كلماته بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم يا الله يا علي يا عظيم يا حليم يا عليم أنت ربي وعلمك حسبي فنعم الرب ربي ونعم الحسب حسبي تنصر من تشاء وأنت العزيز الرحيم نسألك العصمة في الحركات والسكنات والكلمات والإرادات والخطرات من الشكوك والظنون والأوهام الساترة للقلوب عن مطالعة الغيوب فقد ابتلي المؤمنون وزلزلوا زلزالا شديدا وإذ يقول المنافقون والذين في قلوبهم مرض ما وعدنا الله ورسوله إلا غرورا فثبتنا وانصرنا وسخر لنا هذا البحر كما سخرت البحر لموسى وسخرت النار لإبراهيم وسخرت الجبال والحديد لداود وسخرت الريح والشياطين والجن لسليمان. وسخر لنا كل بحر هو لك في الأرض والسماء والملك والملكوت وبحر الدنيا وبحر الآخرة. وسخر لنا كل شيء يا من بيده ملكوت كل شيء. كافا يا عين صاد كافا يا عين صاد كافا يا عين صاد. انصرنا فإنك خير الناصرين وافتح لنا فإنك خير الفاتحين واغفر لنا فإنك خير الغافرين وارحمنا فإنك خير الراحمين وارزقنا فإنك خير الرازقين واهدنا ونجنا من القوم الظالمين. وهب لنا ريحا طيبة كما هي في علمك وانشرها علينا من خزائن رحمتك واحملنا بها حمل الكرامة مع السلامة والعافية في الدين والدنيا والآخرة إنك على كل شيء قدير. اللهم يسر لنا أمورنا مع الراحة لقلوبنا وأبداننا والسلامة والعافية في ديننا ودنيانا. وكن لنا صاحبا في سفرنا وخليفة في أهلنا وطمس على وجوه أعدائنا وامسخهم على مكانتهم فلا يستطيعون المضي ولا المجيء إلينا. ولو نشاء لطمسنا على أعينهم فاستبقوا الصراط فأنى يبصرون. ولو نشاء لمسخناهم على مكانتهم فما استطاعوا المضي ولا يرجعون. ياسين والقرآن الحكيم إنك لمن المرسلين على صراط مستقيم تنزيل العزيز الرحيم لتنذر قوما ما أنذر آباؤهم فهم غافلون. لقد حق القول على أكثرهم فهم لا يؤمنون. إنا جعلنا في أعناقهم أغلالا فهي إلى الأذقان فهم مقمحون. وجعلنا من بين أيديهم سدا ومن خلفهم سدا فأغشيناهم فهم لا يبصرون. شاءت الوجوه شاءت الوجوه شاءت الوجوه وعنت الوجوه للحي القيوم وقد خاب من حمل الظلم. طاسين حاميم عين سين قاف مرج البحرين يلتقيان بينهما برزخ لا يبغيان. حاميم 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 حم الأمر وجاء النصر فعلينا لا ينصرون. حاميم تنزيل الكتاب من الله العزيز العليم غافر الذنب وقابل التوب شديد العقاب ذي الطول لا إله إلا هو إليه المصير. بسم الله بابنا تبارك خطاننا ياسين سقفنا كافا يا عين صاد كفايتنا. حاميم عين سين قاف حمايتنا فسيكفيكهم الله هو السميع العليم. ستر العرش مسبول علينا وعين الله ناظرة إلينا بحول الله لا يقدر علينا والله من ورائهم محيط. بل هو قرآن مجيد في لوح محفوظ فالله خير حافظا وهو أرحم الراحمين. فالله خير حافظا وهو أرحم الراحمين. فالله خير حافظا وهو أرحم الراحمين. إن ولي الله الذي نزل الكتاب وهو يتولى الصالحين. حسبي الله لا إله إلا هو عليه توكلت وهو رب العرش العظيم. حسبي الله لا إله إلا هو عليه توكلت وهو رب العرش العظيم. حسبي الله لا إله إلا هو عليه توكلت وهو رب العرش العظيم. بسم الله الذي لا يضر مع اسمه شيء في الأرض ولا في السماء وهو السميع العليم. بسم الله الذي لا يضر مع اسمه شيء في الأرض ولا في السماء وهو السميع العليم. بسم الله الذي لا يضر مع اسمه شيء في الأرض ولا في السماء وهو السميع العليم. ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما. الله لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم لا تأخذه سنة ولا نوم له ما في السماوات وما في الأرض من ذا الذي يشفع عنده إلا بإذنه يعلم ما بين أيديهم وما خلفهم ولا يحيطون بشيء من علمه إلا بما شاء وسع كرسيه السماوات والأرض ولا يؤوده حفظهما وهو العلي العظيم. يا الله يا نور يا حق يا مبين اكسني من نورك وعلمني من علمك وأفهمني عنك وأسمعني منك وبصرني بك وأقمني بشهودك وعرفني الطريق إليك وهونها علي بفضلك وألبسني لباس التقوى منك إنك على كل شيء قدير. يا سميع يا عليم يا حليم يا علي يا عظيم يا الله اسمع دعائي بخصائص لطفك آمين. أعوذ بكلمات الله التامات كلها من شر ما خلق. أعوذ بكلمات الله التامات كلها من شر ما خلق. أعوذ بكلمات الله التامات كلها من شر ما خلق. يا عظيم السلطان يا قديم الإحسان يا دائم النعماء يا باسط الرزق يا كثير الخيرات يا واسع العطاء يا دافع البلاء ويا سامع الدعاء يا حاضرا ليس بغائب يا موجودا عند شدائد يا خفي اللطف يا لطيف الصنع يا حليما لا يعجل اقض حاجتي برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم إنك تعلم ما نحن فيه وما نطلبه ونرتجيه من رحمتك في أمرنا كله فيسر لنا ما نحن فيه من سفرنا وما نطلبه من حوائجنا وقرب علينا المسافات وسلمنا من العلل والآفات ولا تجعل الدنيا أكبر همنا ولا مبلغ علمنا ولا تسلط علينا من لا يرحمنا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. نشهد أن لا إله إلا الله نستغفر الله نسألك الجنة ونعوذ بك من النار. نشهد أن لا إله إلا الله نستغفر الله نسألك الجنة ونعوذ بك من النار. نشهد أن لا إله إلا الله نستغفر الله نسألك الجنة ونعوذ بك من النار. اللهم إنك عفو تحب العفو فاعف عنا. اللهم إنك عفو تحب العفو فاعف عنا. اللهم إنك عفو تحب العفو فاعف عنا يا كريم. نشهد أن لا إله إلا الله نستغفر الله من النار. نشهد أن لا إله إلا الله نستغفر الله نسألك الجنة ونعوذ بك من النار. نشهد أن لا إله إلا الله نستغفر الله نسألك الجنة ونعوذ بك من النار. اللهم إنك عفو تحب العفو فاعف عنا. اللهم إنك عفو تحب العفو فاعف عنا. اللهم إنك عفو تحب العفو فاعف عنا يا كريم. نشهد أن لا إله إلا الله نستغفر الله نسألك الجنة ونعوذ بك من النار. نشهد أن لا إله إلا الله نستغفر الله نسألك الجنة ونعوذ بك من النار. نشهد أن لا إله إلا الله نستغفر الله نسألك الجنة ونعوذ بك من النار. اللهم إنك عفو تحب العفو فاعف عنا. اللهم إنك عفو تحب العفو فاعف عنا. اللهم إنك عفو تحب العفو فاعف عنا يا كريم.
We continue from page 32 on the title, The Consequences of This Danger. Another consequence of this great danger is that a false tribalism can take root and thrive in the soul. A tribal loyalty towards whatever it is that the bearer of the soul affiliates with. It could be a family, a tribe, a shaykh, or a congregation. This tribalism will make him look down on his friends and brothers who do not share the same affiliation. The soul continues to be nourished by this feeling and comes to rely on its perception until the mind of the one bearing that soul completely loses sight of the meaning of the verse 49, or Surah 49, verse 10, Surah al-Hujurat. Verily the believers are brothers. Instead, he creates a very narrow brotherhood according to his own understanding, which is in turn produces various harmful effects without him even noticing them or being aware of them. One of the most conspicuous effects that you might find is when some people's appreciation of an idea or principle turns into sanctification of an individual or entity. Then the individual that he sanctifies becomes the measure of the truth that he believes in, instead of the truth itself being the measure by which individuals are evaluated and appraised. Conversely, this individual will not see anything worthy of consideration or contemplation outside whatever he is affiliated with. If it is the truth in his imagination and is only the source for that which is pure and infallible, other people possessing something that contradicts it is proof, in his view, that it is false. If it agrees with it, then it must have been taken from it and be a branch of it. How many people go astray like this? How many people changes Allah's rulings and revealed law for this reason? May Allah have mercy on the great Islamic preacher, Badi az-Zaman, Sayyid al-Nursi. He noticed one time that among his students were those who would sanctify a school of thought and magnify the truth therein because it had been distinguished by al-Nursi. They would believe that the exemplar to follow was what was embodied in his person. So he wrote a detailed letter to his students in which he said the following: beware of attaching to the truth that I am calling you towards, to my sinning transitory body or transitory person. Rather, you must immediately attach it to the most sanctified source, Allah's book and the Sunnah of His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And you should know that I am nothing more than a middleman for the all-merciful Jalla wa Ala's merchandise. You should also know that I am a human being and not infallible. I could sin or go astray, and then the outward truth that you have attached to me becomes disfigured by the sin or deviation. Then either I become an exemplar of deviation and sin for people, or I become someone who turns them away from the truth because I disfigured it and mixed it with my deviations and sins. This dangerous tribalism goes back to the nature of egoism within a person. A person, which is one of the most dangerous diseases of the heart that the Muslim must treat and persistently struggle in order to rid himself of it. Egoism can be embodied in individualism for some people. They are people who sanctify their individual personalities more than being a part of a people, a group, or congregation. In other people, it can be embodied as collectivism. They are the people who are so engaged in the association with a group, organization, or congregation that they do not think about the individuality. It might even be embodied in some manifestation of calling to the truth, such as someone who becomes angry, become of some wrong perpetrated in his presence, and it seems it a belittlement of religious personality. You will see one of them become extremely angry because presumably the sanctity and nobility of the religion was violated. But if you were to look into his soul, you would see that he only flew into a rage because the sanctity and nobility of his own person was disturbed. A sign of this is that if he did not bear a known religious appearance and none of the people committing that wrong were aware of him, he would have passed them by without paying them any attention or concern. Then there is a person who is affiliated to a Shaykh congregation. He never ceases to be zealot for the individual of that organization. His egoism leads him to have such zealotry and that he thinks that the sincere Muslims are only those who are affiliated to his Shaykh or his congregation. All other Muslims of a second class. If a Muslim is not with his Shaykh or congregation, he must be against them. This collective egoism can also be embodied in teachings and slogans that the individuals affiliated with the group are made to think are part of the essential teachings of Islam. The remedy for the tribalism that stems from the egoism I have described is not for the Muslim to leave the Shaykh that he is learning from, the spiritual guide that he is benefiting from, or the congregation that he is working with. No, this is not the remedy. Rather, the remedy is for the Muslim to realize that the Shaykh he is learning from, the spiritual guide who is taken him under his wing, or the congregation that he is working with is a means and not an end. Furthermore, the means are only important to the extent that they are in harmony with and agree with the end, which is the foundation. When the Muslim realizes this, he knows that his loyalty should only be for the end, which is Islam itself, and that his connection to Islam by means of a Shaykh or congregation should only be according to the extent that fulfills his loyalty for him in the best way and allows him to submit to Allah's religion and adhere to its rulings. When the Muslim arguments his loyalty to his reality, more attachment and love, egoism melts away in the blaze of that attachment. There will be nothing to embody their individualism or collectivism. Instead, the nature of his state will turn into one self-sacrifice for the sake of Islam as it is. And his connection to others, whoever they are, whoever they may be, will be under the shade of that loyalty and under its care and supervision. Thus his love for his Shaykh does not distract him or distract from what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has obligated upon him. Nor does his following congregation or brethren drive him away from being loyal to all the other sincere Muslims. This is because his connection to his Shaykh and congregation is merely a branch of his essential, firm connection to Allah's book and the Sunnah of his Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the principles and rulings that they lay down. In summary, all the problems and afflictions that the Muslims are suffering from today stem from this great danger. If it were not for this danger, their hearts would overflow with sincerity and goodwill, and then trust and confidence would spread amongst them. If that were then achieved, they would then be able to work together and get things done in the fastest and easiest way possible. They would then increase in power and
الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين والجنة للموحدين ولا عدوان إلا على الظالمين. والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الخلق والمرسلين نبينا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. All praise belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The choicest of blessings and salutations upon our Master Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. All praise belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who has allowed us to pray Salatul Asr in congregation. And the prayer that is performed in congregation is 25 or 27 times more virtuous than a prayer that is performed individually. And all praise belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for those who are early they participated in the recitation of Surah Al-Waqi'ah. And we know that the virtue of the Quran is that every letter of the Quran earns you 10 rewards. But that reward in the month of Ramadan is multiplied. And the one who recites the Quran, which is a sunnah in this month, receives the reward of a compulsory act. And thus, the recitation of the Quran, one of the ways in which Quran recitation becomes compulsory upon a person is when he takes a vow. Lillahi alayya, by Allah it is upon me to recite the Quran for whatever purpose he wishes to take a vow. And then that recitation becomes compulsory, and when that recitation becomes compulsory, it becomes more virtuous. So we do not receive the reward of a supererogatory recitation of Surah Al-Waqi'ah, but a fard reward for the recitation of Surah Al-Waqi'ah. And we previously covered that the home in which Surah Waqi'ah is recited will not experience poverty. And then we recited the Hizb al-Bahar of Sidi Abu al-Hasan al-Shadhili. And Sidi Abu al-Hasan al-Shadhili was one of the great awliya of the Ummah of Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, where there exists an agreement among the scholars of Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah that he was one of the great saints of this Ummah. And he was someone that came from Fez in Morocco. And his Hizb al-Bahar is known, the virtues of it are many. The adhkar, the wird that we recited now just before the class started, the benefit of it is many. And the ulama stated that nobody who experiences fear and then recites the Hizb al-Bahar is safe that his fear will disappear and he will experience safety. And there's no person that is ill that recites the Hizb al-Bahar with an intention of cure, say that Allah will give him cure. And they say that there is no malhoof, someone that is filled with worry and anxiety, that recites the Hizb al-Bahar, say that Allah will remove his worry and his anxiety. And our mashayikh, they had a strong attachment to the Hizb al-Bahar and encouraged us to recite it every day after the prayer of Asr. And this is a point that I'm making now because I want to touch upon it when I reach the last consequence of this danger that Dr. Bhuti was speaking about. In his last point, if someone can just remind me if I don't get back to it, on the point of the Hizb al-Bahar, is the last point Dr. Bhuti makes is how tribalism, when the sickness or the nafs is spoiled within, one of the harms is that a person becomes fanatical about his Shaykh or about his Sufi order or about his group or about his jama'ah or about his movement, such that he looks down upon everyone else that is not part of his group and his students of his Shaykh and his tariqah and so forth and so on. The recitation of our mashayikh, of the Hizb al-Bahar, of Abu al-Hasan al-Shadhili, shows us a middle path in terms of our attachment to Sufi orders and our attachment to scholars. But that I'm mentioning prematurely now is a point that I want to get to later. Our mashayikh had a strong attachment to the Hizb al-Bahar of Sidi Abu al-Hasan al-Shadhili and encouraged us to recite it every day after Salatul Asr. And I know of many persons that faced various challenges in their lives, and they began reciting the Hizb al-Bahar with an intention that Allah should remove those challenges, and Allah removed it. And one of the lines in the Hizb al-Bahar is a line that reads, وَسَخِّرْ لَنَا هَذَا الْبَحَرِ. Make subservient to us this ocean, and ocean here is symbolical of the challenge that lies in front of him. And therefore the person that reads the Hizb al-Bahar, when he reaches this line, وَسَخِّرْ لَنَا هَذَا الْبَحَرِ, he should bring to mind the challenge that he is facing. Oh Allah, make it subservient to me. كَمَا سَخَّرْتَ الْبَحْرَ لِمُوسَى, is how you have made oceans subservient to Nabi Musa alayhi salatu wasalam. And of course he's referring to the river Nile. When Nabi Musa alayhi salatu wasalam took his staff and hit the Nile split into two halves. And that is one of the miracles that Allah mentions in the Quran. And that also touches upon the systems that Allah had. The systems from the systems of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are the miracles that He allows to be performed on the hands of the prophets and the awliya and salihin. Except that the miracle of a prophet is called a mu'jiza, and the miracle of a wali is called a karama. So alhamdulillah for Salatul Asr in congregation. that Salatul Asr in the month of Ramadan equals the reward of 70 Salatul Asrs. And you can now take 70 Salatul Asrs and times its virtue by 27. And then we recited Surah Al-Waqi'ah. And then we recited the Hizbul Bahr. May Allah through these actions remove all our worries and our concerns and our challenges and our difficulties. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bring ease into all of our affairs. So Dr. Bhuti is continuing now. What's he speaking about? Inward sin, the greatest danger in the lives of Muslims. He started off, he spoke about the person that came and met with him and how his answer was somewhat abrupt. And that person left with more worry than actually finding guidance. And then he wrote this work. And he first spoke about the greatest danger, which is A'da aduwika nafsuka. Your greatest enemy, the Prophet said, is your soul that is in front of you, within you. And then he said that the fuel to the soul, the fasad, the badness of the soul is hubbud dunya. And how from hubbud dunya all other sins of the heart arise and are born. And then he got into a discussion, why is it important for us to purify the soul, to purify the nafs, to purify the inner, to keep the nafs tame. Like in the example of Mullah Mu'adh, let the nafs be a poodle and not a Rottweiler. Why is it important? There are consequences. The consequences, first of it is, Muslims won't agree on anything. They will constantly be fighting. No one will desire good for anyone else. I won't become happy with the progress of my Muslim brother, and I will become sad. I'll become happy with the loss of my Muslim brother and sad with his progress. So there will be no unity. We won't be able to work together. Everyone will have their own agenda. Everyone will have their own vision. No one will be able to share ideas and share vision. No one will wish good for each other. And like that, the ummah can never ever move forward. And that's the first greatest danger of the soul being bad. The second danger, he said, rahimahullah tabaraka wa ta'ala, was, they said that persons, what they do is using religion for their political agendas. And that is something we expounded upon yesterday, and I don't wish to get back into it. The point that Dr. Bhuti spoke about yesterday that we did not mention today was from the signs of the soul, from the consequences of the soul being spoiled, the nafs being bad, the ruh being filthy, is that we look down upon people that are treading a path wherein they are trying to clean their souls. That was his last point he made yesterday that we didn't get to touch upon. So I see persons, they are striving to purify themselves. They are striving to become better Muslims. So they engage in dhikrullah, and they attend gatherings of salawat, and they attend the mawlud, and they attend classes of knowledge, and they attend programs such as the Rawha, and with an intention of purifying the heart. And when, from the sickness of the soul, is when I look down upon such people, and I think to myself, look how they're wasting their time, there's so much more important things to do. He's going to another mawlud, why doesn't he rather go make a pot of food for someone that is hungry, by way of example? So we start looking at the actions from the sickness of the soul, is when I start looking down upon people that are treading a path with an intention of purifying themselves. And Dr. Bhuti said about those people, he said that it is the idea of becoming focused on the heart. Right? People say, like I've heard this before, why on earth, these days, most of our brothers, they travel to the city of Tarim to meet the Salihin, to meet the Arifin, Nawaz of Allah, with the intention of sitting in their company and benefiting from their presence and attaining purity of heart. Right? A few years ago, many of our seniors, the students of Shaykh Nazim, rahimahullah ta'ala, used to travel to Cyprus, where Shaykh Nazim stayed. I heard many people criticizing him, why are they traveling all the way there to go sit in the company of? Why do they go? Can't they just... So what happens is, from the sickness of the heart, is when I start criticizing people who are actually trying to purify their heart. I'm so blinded that my heart is corroded, and the importance of purifying my heart, that I have nothing better to do than to criticize those who are trying to tread this path, the path of tasawwuf, which is a path that focuses on the cleansing of the heart. Subhanallah. So that's another consequence that he mentioned. Today's consequence is many. Today, Dr. Bhuti, rahimahullah ta'ala, shared many things. And each and every one of them are important. And the thing that he highlighted most was tribalism. One of the consequences of a heart that is impure, of a soul that is rotten, of a nafs that is like a Rottweiler, from the consequences he sees is tribalism. And tribalism here could be to your family, it could be towards your jama'ah or your congregation, it can be towards your movement, it can be towards your shaykh, it can be towards your Sufi order, your tariqah. Right? So when the soul is bad and spoiled, then what happens is that I see khair only in what I'm doing, and whatever everyone else is doing is bad. I don't see good anywhere else. If my focus, by way of example, is da'wah, we do da'wah. So now because I'm doing da'wah, everyone else that is doing anything else besides da'wah is upon batil. They're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. And the other person that is focused on the heart and Sufism, he becomes so fixated on that whoever is doing anything else besides this is upon batil. So what he does is he narrows the scope of brotherhood. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't say that indeed the Sufis are brothers, or indeed the callers to Allah, people engaging in da'wah are brothers. Allah didn't say the students of knowledge are brothers. What did Allah say? Allah said, إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ, indeed the believers are brothers. So from the sickness of my heart and a sign of the fasad of my soul and my nafs is that I become fanatical about my group, and I become fanatical about my teacher, and I lose focus of things which are more important, harmony that should exist, understanding that should exist, brotherhood that should exist. No. There's many points he made, but as we're browsing through, sometimes it's not always easy to pick them up. La ilaha illallah. He made the example of Sayyid Nursi. Sayyid Nursi was one of the great Turkish ulama. Sayyid Nursi, Badi'u Zaman, was a giant in the ulum. Like one of the things I always remember about Sayyid Nursi in his biography, if you study in Islamic studies, there's a subject known as Islamic legal theory, Usul al-Fiqh. Usul al-Fiqh is a very technical subject. You start off with simple texts, you make your way to the waraqat of Imam al-Haramain, and eventually your highest level of reading may be something like in our madrasa at least, we read the Lubb al-Usul of Shaykh al-Islam Zakir al-Ansari or the Ghayat al-Usul. One of the sources of Usul al-Fiqh was a text by Al-Imam Taqiyuddin al-Subki called Jam' al-Jawami. Imam al-Subki Jam' al-Jawami. Right? It's a extremely complicated read of about 4 volumes. They said Badi'u Zaman Sayyid Nursi memorized the Jam' al-Jawami. How do you memorize a book like that? Which, by the way, the other day in class, Al-Imam Nawawi, when he said he wrote the Tibyan, I forgot to mention this. This book that we're reading, after the second book we're reading in the Rawha, Imam Nawawi said he chose to make this book very brief, so that its memorization becomes easy. So, who has memorized anything of this thus far? He said, I preferred brevity when compiling the etiquette with the Quran, so its memorization becomes easy. The scholars of early used to put a lot of emphasis on memorization, on memorizing. So Nursi was a brilliant scholar. To have memorized the Jam' al-Jawami, that alone tells you what an amazing scholar he was. And of course, his students were very attached to him and very close to him. And when he noticed one of his students only sanctifying and considering great that which the teacher considered great and what the teacher considered right, so he admonished his student. He said to him, beware of attaching the truth that I am calling you towards to my sinning transitory person. Rather, you must immediately attach it to its most sanctified source, the Book of Allah and the Sunnah of His Prophet ﷺ. And you should know that I am nothing more than a middleman for the All-Merciful's merchandise. He's telling his student, I am not the objective. I am just here to connect you to something which is more important. I'm just here to connect you to that which is great. I'm here to connect you to a legacy. Right? And this is exactly what we see within our mashayikh. Sayyid Habib Umar, on so many occasions, his talks are revolved around what? That the Prophet ﷺ must become your shaykh. That's ultimately, Rasul ﷺ must become your shaykh. Sayyid Habib Umar said once, he said in one of the programs in Dar Mustafa, he told the students that if your happiness, how did the statement, the translation goes now then? If you find yourself, if you see another Sufi order, a different tariqah, or a different masjid, or a different madrasa, or a different organization that you may be competing with, perhaps in the spirit of good competition. There's always competition going to take place, and within Islam there's scope for good competition. وَسَابِقُوا إِلَى مَغْفِرَةٍ مِّن رَبِّكُمْ وَسَابِقُوا إِلَى الْخَيْرَاتِ. Allah speaks about competing with sincerity for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There is room for healthy competition within Islam. Because in existence we are all competing with each other. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that Allah created life and death, or death and life. Allah said, تَبَارَكَ الَّذِي بِيَدِهِ الْمُلْكُ الَّذِي خَلَقَ الْمَوْتَ وَالْحَيَاةَ. Allah created death and Allah created life, لِيَبْلُوَكُمْ, to test you, أَيُّكُمْ أَحْسَنُ, whom of you are best. When Allah said, whom of you are best, it means Allah wants us to compete with each other who can be best. It's competition. أَيُّكُمْ أَحْسَنُ عَمَلًا, whom of you are best in what? In worshipping me, in turning to me, in making my ibadah, in crying in front of me, in reciting my Quran, in making tahajjud. We're technically competing with each other. But we should ask ourselves, where am I? Because our community, as long as I know, Cape Townians are very competitive. Like, put them in any field, they always want to be the best. Put them on a soccer field, I want to be the best soccer player. Right? Like, I see competition among fishermen like I haven't seen it anywhere else. Fishermen, in the spirit of competition, the stories they relate, subhanallah. My uncle, he passed away now, Uncle Ali used to say, his son is Siraj, the Ali used to say, die man sê, hy het so 'n vis gevang. And then when he told it for the second time, he said, it was so 'n vis. And when he told it for the third time, it was so 'n vis. By the time he told the story of the 10th time, the fish was... So, we're just competitive. Everyone, whatever sports, whatever activity, we're always striving to be better. But for some reason or the other, when it comes to deen, there's no competition. Where is the competition for deen? Who's competing who's first in the masjid and who's leaving last? Who's competing who's every waqt in the masjid? Who's competing who's reading more Quran? Who's competing who's studying more deen? Who's competing who's attending the tahajjud program? Here's the competition when it comes to our deen. I'm speaking about healthy competition. Healthy competition means not because I want to be better in your eyes, I want to be better in Allah's eyes. Right? But how did I get there now? So there is healthy competition between organizations. But when you have organizations that are serving Allah, every Sufi tariqah serves Allah. Every masjid or jama'ah or congregation or religious organization serves who? Serves Allah. That's it. So Sayyid Hayy Umar said, if you find that your heart is less happy with the progress of another organization or another Sufi order, your heart is less happy to see them progressing than the happiness your heart experiences when your own group, when your own congregation, when your own Sufi order progresses. Then you should know that there's a serious problem with your heart. That's like profound. Sayyid Habib is saying, any order, no matter who it is, if the Shaykh or the masjid or the community or the movement, as long as the aqidah is sound and they from the Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, when you see them progressing, your heart should experience the same happiness that your heart would experience should you be progressing. Because if they're progressing in serving Allah. And when you're progressing in serving Allah. And as long as both organizations or institutions or Sufi orders are serving Allah, why should I be more happy here and less happy there? Right? SubhanAllah. Imagine the state of our hearts. He said also, this was a very interesting point he made here. He said, then there is a person who is affiliated to a Shaykh or congregation. He never ceases to be the zealot for that individual or that organization. His egoism leads him to have such zealotry that he thinks that the sincere Muslims are only those who are affiliated to his Shaykh. I was thinking about this. We have persons sometimes, they're so attached to a view. You would think that they are the most pious people walking on the face of the earth just in terms of the attachment to one single view that exists. I give you an example. Right? I make this example more than often. And this is not a discussion of who's right when it comes to Eid, right? So in our community, of course you have people that celebrate Eid. Predominantly the vast majority celebrate Eid with the sighting of the moon. Eid al-Adha, the Eid of Hajj, Eid al-Adha. The vast majority, Dhul Hijjah enters in the moon is sighted, and 10 days later is Eid. A minority in our community, they say no, one should not celebrate Eid with the sighting of the moon, but your celebration of Eid is tied into Makkah. Right? Whenever they celebrate Eid in Makkah, you should celebrate Eid with the people in Makkah. Now, I don't want to speak about who's right and who's wrong. I feel just have in your heart a respect for every view, for both views. If there are qualified ulama that adopt a view, even if they are minorities, respect it and carry on with your life, while finding contentment in the view of the majority that you may be following. The problem isn't the difference that exists. The problem is the attitude. And this is part of the sickness of the heart. So I become almost rigid to the view of my school, of my Shaykh, of my teacher, from the sickness of the heart that it leads to what? It leads to breaking down of ties, it leads to families breaking apart, it leads to... And the reality is that, where does it come from? So you're creating the impression that it's your attachment to deen. One man, he says, an uncle relates the story to me. He says that I will never ever celebrate Eid of the moon. Right? It's as if it's the greatest sin under the sun. You can rather kill me before I celebrate Eid of the moon. So what does it sound now? It sounds like this person is very serious about his deen. Right? It's like somebody says that, I follow the Shafi'i school, and if I touch my wife, my wudu breaks. Right? And then he says that I will never adopt the view that says touching your wife doesn't break your wudu. I would rather die. I know it sounds very funny, but maybe the person makes that statement because of him wanting to implement the Sharia of Allah. He wants to do what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala requires of him. So he said, I will rather die, but I'll never celebrate Eid of the moon. So now, that speaks almost of piety. It speaks about attachment to deen. It speaks about taking deen very serious. But it's not that. It's all the ego. It's all a sign of the nafs that is spoiled and bad and rotten. And what's the sign of that? The person that related this to me, he said that same uncle, when they went to his house, His daughter was sitting in the lounge with a boyfriend. Her aura was uncovered. Music is coming from the home. There's no deen in his life. Where is the deen? There's no deen in his life. But he wants to die before he celebrates Eid with the moon. So part of what Dr. Booty is sharing here is that when the soul is rotten, we create these type of attachments to people and to things and to a shaykh and to the tariqah, and shaitan allows that to become a means for me to distance myself from my Muslim brothers. And I forget about things which are more important. I forget about unity. I forget about brotherhood. No. So these are from the... And now you can see as he goes along and he lists them one by one, and he makes much more examples, and I'm just trying to cover the gist of what he shared. And if you have the book, of course, you read it by yourself. But just see how far reaching and how far damaging the nafs is. All Dr. Booty wants you to understand, because he's driving the point home. Right? This is now our second day that we're really speaking about consequences. He wants to show you how bad things are because of the nafs. And the reason why he's impressing upon you how bad things are because of the nafs is so that you can realize that I need to resolve the matter. I need to rectify my nafs. I need to start working on my nafs. And if I'm not going to start doing that, then what's going to be left of me? If I don't do that, I won't have a marriage. If I don't do that, I won't have friends. If I don't do that, no one in the masjid will want to speak to me. If I don't do that, I'll have no one to speak to. If I don't have that, my jealousy will kill me within. Because jealousy and malice and hatred and all of this, if you're in a position of power, you start wars and you start fights and you start... But if you're not in a position to start a war, start a fight, you're just basically killing yourself. Right? So Dr. Booty is just driving the point home. You must realize that you need to focus on the nafs, you need to focus on the soul, you need to purify yourself. Ya Rabb. May Allah allow us to focus on the soul and focus on the hearts. Ameen Ya Rabbal Alameen. Habib Abdurragman bin Abdullah al-Faqih said that it's the most amazing, most strangest thing is that a person, when he has an injury on his hand or an injury on his leg, he exerts himself in treating his hand and treating his... He burnt his hand or he cut his hand. Immediately focus on getting Dettol, killing the germs, putting something on. He's always willing to. But when his heart becomes ill, he doesn't worry about fixing it. He's worried about the nail, he's worried about the finger, he's worried about the toe. He's worried about everything on his body, but when his heart is ill, it doesn't bother him. So he leaves his heart as such, and he leaves his heart as such until that person, when he dies in a state where his heart is dead, la yahya, he won't have an eternal life of felicity and happiness. May Allah allow us to become focused on that which is important. Habib Umar bin Abdurrahman al-Attaz, he said that the people of the past, the Sahaba Ridwanullahi ta'ala majma'in, they were a people of heart and they had no nafs. كان الناس قلوبا بلا نفوس. They were hearts without any nufus, no nafs. Then people became people that were hearts and nafs. Right? So there was the hearts were there, but there was also nafs. And then he said, today people have become nafs without heart. There's just nufus, there's no hearts left any longer. Ya Rabb, may Allah allow us to work on our hearts, and our hearts become purified. And we said previously that the sign of the purified heart is the heart that desires good for others, becomes happy with the achievement of others. The purified heart is a heart that doesn't consider anyone's company beneath him. The purified heart was the heart of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Whenever he greeted someone sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he wouldn't be the first person to retract and pull his hand back. Whenever he spoke to somebody, he faced the person with his entire chest. He didn't face the person from his side. Whenever anyone spoke to him, he listened attentively and believed what that person is saying is important. A lady once called him in the road and said, Ya Rasulullah, I need to speak to you about something. The Prophet ﷺ sat on the side of the road with a lady listening to all her complaints, and he tried to resolve her issues. That's a sign of Allah. And that interaction with people is one of the best ways to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Shaykh of our Shaykh, Habib Abdul Qadir bin Ahmad al-Saqaf, I remember our teacher Habib Muhammad bin Abdurragman Saqaf telling us that he said that Habib Abdul Qadir, he gave himself to the people completely. He had time for everyone. He would walk, in his early days in Jeddah, he used to walk for hours, knocking on people's doors, checking how they are, visiting them. I remember, that's Habib Abdul Qadir. He eventually, when Allah opens up for him and became the qutb of the time, he's a person like our most senior mashayikh today. They would sit by his feet hoping that he just says one word to them. For the last 10 years of his life, he never spoke. Not because he could not speak, he chose not to speak for the last 10 years of his life. But very rarely would say something. The Habaib, they have, one of the things of the Habaib is that, they would, sometimes they read a verse of the Quran to a point where they stop and then they recite it so that you're reading it with them, and then they stop and then you complete it. If you spend time in their company, you'd appreciate what I'm saying. So they may, Inna anzalnahu fi, and then you complete Laylatul Qadr. Now that happens even more when it comes to poetry. So they'll read like, قَدْ كَفَانِي عِلْمُ رَبِّي مِنْ سُؤَالِي, and the person responds, وَاخْتِيَارِي. Like, imagine Habib Ali Abu Bakr Mashur. Habib Abu Bakr Mashur. Abu Bakr Ali Mashur. Habib Umar. They would visit Habib Abdul Qadir bin Ahmad Saqaf. They would be sitting in front of him. They would read poetry to him, hoping that he just responds to one of the lines of poetry that they're reading. If he just utters one word, they'd leave ecstatic. As like they achieved the best of this world and the next if he just had uttered one word. Their love and admiration for him was beyond compare. I previously mentioned how Shaykh Mutawalli al-Sha'rawi would sit at his feet and wouldn't even sit next to him on the couch. And he used to say that, I belong here by your feet, Ya Habib. And that station that he attained, Habib Muhammad said, was just because of his chest being pure and him having sabr with people. Never turned anyone away. And on one occasion when he got into his car, it's a famous story, many of you may have heard it many times. He got into his car, an excited student of his that wanted to serve him closed the door behind him. And when he sat down and the student closed the door on his hand. Salamatul Sadr was such that he didn't want to break the heart of the student, so he kept hidden the pain that he has because of the door that was closed on his fingers, and he continued smiling at the student so that the student's heart is not broken. Because had that student known that he closed the door on the hand of Habib Abdul Qadir, khalas, he'd be sad for the rest of his life. So Habib just continued smiling, and the driver drove around the corner. He said, please stop, my hand is stuck in the door. I need some help. And it opened the door and his hand was bleeding. But Salamatul Sadr means that you desire good for people. You want people to feel good. You say good things. So when the Sadr is pure, you become a source of benefit. And you become a source of light. And you become a source of guidance. But when the soul is not pure, all what comes from you is fitna. All what comes from you is trouble. Right? These people, you see them in communities, whenever you see them, you know there's trouble. Nothing good going to come from it. Right? That's very sad. The Prophet ﷺ made reference to it. There's people, they're so troublesome, they always have problems, they're always complaining, they're always taking issue, and sometimes with no base, most of the time no basis. Right? There's people that if they were to die tomorrow, their loss means nothing to the community. If my nafs is bad, my loss is not nothing to the community, it's a relief to the community. But if my nafs is pure, then my loss is a loss to the community. My death is a loss to the community. And we can ask ourselves these questions. Like, what is my death to the community going? No. Is your wife going to say, Alhamdulillah, when you die? Is she going to... Ya Rabb, oh Allah, purify our hearts. Oh Allah, purify our hearts. So the consequences are serious. What remains now is, and this is tomorrow's dars, because again, Dr. Bhuti, his intention is not just to multiply the problem. He's just basically giving you the problem. The sunnah of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam is that he doesn't give you the problem, he gives you solutions. Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam actually, he gave you more than what you asked. One of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, many times he was asked a question, and then he didn't only answer your question, he answered something related to your question. Like the Sahaba come to Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Ya Rasulullah, inna nastad al-bahar. We go fishing on the oceans. Can we make hudu with the water of the ocean? So the Prophet ﷺ, he says that at-tahuru ma'uhu. Its water is pure. Tahur means it has the quality, it's clean in itself and it has a quality to purify. At-tahuru ma'uhu. But now since you're on the ocean, the Prophet doesn't just say at-tahuru ma'uhu, he tells him also al-hillu maytatu, and its carrion is halal for you to eat. See, he gives you more, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Allah purify our hearts. Now the best ways to purify our hearts is with the Quran. Bismillah. The etiquette of the Quran. So Dr. Bhuti will be speaking about the remedy from tomorrow, inshallah ta'ala. But before we get to Dr. Bhuti, we're moving on to the ultimate remedy of remedies, the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the kalam of Allah. And we want to read about what etiquette we should have with Allah's kalam. Bismillah.
Etiquette of the Quran, page 15. Come to you from the earth, the readings of knowledge. When they come to you, make them your concern. Tirmidhi, Ibn Majah, and others related. Something like it was related to us in Musnad al-Darimi by way of Abu al-Darda, radiallahu anh. Sincerity towards students. The teacher should make every effort to be sincere to whomever recites to him, since the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, religion is sincerity towards Allah, His book, His messenger, the leaders of Muslims and their common folk. Muslim related it. Sincerity towards Allah and His book includes honoring its reciter and its student, guiding him to his best interest, being kind to him, assisting him in his studies with all that one can. It includes harmonizing the student's heart, being open-handed by teaching him gently, being kind towards him and encouraging him to learn. The teacher should mention the superiority of learning the student so that it causes him to be eager and increases his desire, makes him abstinent in this world and changes him from being inclined towards the world from being deluded by it. The teacher should mention to him the superiority of being occupied with the Quran and all other religious sciences. This is the path of those who have knowledge of Allah, the resolute and the righteous worshippers of Allah. and it is the rank of the prophets, Allah bless him and grant him peace. The teacher should feel compassion for the student and pay attention to his well-being, just as he pays attention to his own well-being and his son's. The teacher assumes the role of the student's father by having compassion for him, concern for his well-being, and patience with his roughness and ill manners, and he pardons him for his poor behavior in some circumstances since he is prone to shortcomings, especially if he is young in age. The teacher, without exception, should like for his student what he likes for himself, and dislike for him the shortcomings that he dislikes for himself. It has been firmly established in the Sahihain that the Messenger of Allah ﷺ said, "None is until he loves for he loves for himself." Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhum said, "The one I must respect the most is the one sitting before me, he who stepped over people's necks until he sat before me. If I were capable of preventing a single fly from landing on his face, I would have done so." And in one narration it reads, "And flies land on his face and it bothers me." Not possessed of arrogance. The teacher should not be arrogant towards his students. Instead, he should be gentle and humble. Many well-known accounts have been related about the importance of having humility with ordinary individuals. So how is it with those who are like one's own children, especially given what they are doing, occupied with the Quran? All of this is in addition to what they hold over him already, including the right of companionship and the right to go to him repeatedly. It has been related that the Prophet ﷺ said, "Be gentle with your student and with your teacher." Ayyub al-Tiyani radiallahu anhu said, "The teacher should put dirt on his gentleness towards Allah, mighty and majestic."
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. We continue with the At-Tibyan fi Adab Hamalat al-Quran of Al-Imam, the great scholar and saint, Al-Imam al-Nawawi rahimahullah tabaraka wa ta'ala. And he said here that in the first chapter he said that it is necessary for the teacher of the Quran. He's continued speaking about the etiquettes of the teacher of the Quran and the student of the Quran. And whatever points I made yesterday with regards to aspiring to be a teacher of the Quran and also using these as guidelines for who I select as a teacher of the Quran for my child, these are things that should be kept in mind as we go through this. So the teacher should be subtle towards the one that reads towards him. You should welcome him, be kind to him. Abu Sa'id al-Khudri radiallahu ta'ala anhu, when his students used to come to him to study and recite Quran to him, he used to shout out to them, "Marhaban bi wasiyyati Rasulillah." Welcome to the bequest, literally, of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that people will follow you, he said to the Sahaba. And when men come to you from around the world to come and study by you, فَإِذَا أَتَوْكُمْ فَاسْتَوْصُوا بِهِمْ خَيْرًا. When they come to you, then show them kindness. Be gentle towards them. Show them beauty. So the Prophet ﷺ gave them that wasiyah. Wasiyah, I translated as a bequest, which here and more means advice. It was advices Rasul ﷺ gave them that when people come to study by you, welcome them and treat them good. And so when people came to study by Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, he used to say, "Welcome, O you who was the advice that we received from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam." Now, teachers of the Quran, subhanallah. I read this and I think a lot of my teachers of the Quran. Most of my Quran I memorized with Shaykh Ismail, but I had many teachers of the Quran and all of them were amazing in their own way. The most senior of them would have been Mullah Adil Joha and Shaykh Ismail, but among them there were so many other. And I don't want to mention their names because I might leave out one teacher's name in that. But all of them, we carry them on our heads and we show them the greatest of respect. With regard to Shaykh Ismail, the best days of my lives were the days when we spent memorizing the Quran with him. And if you have a good personality and a welcoming personality and a kind personality, then even if you try to be strict, you can't be strict. Like I remember Shaykh Ismail, there were times when he was strict. There was nothing that Once a teacher shows kindness towards a student, and the student loves the teacher, then he doesn't need a cane, doesn't need punishment. If the student loves the teacher, he does whatever the teacher wants from him. Khalas. The greatest punishment for me, if I did not know my work when I recited to Shaykh Ismail, the greatest punishment was Shaykh became upset with me. I worked hard because I didn't want my teacher to be upset with me. That's like the biggest driving force. And when he was upset, there was a time, like a period of 2 or 3 days when Shaykh was like just upset, like very strict. And he raised his voice and lowered my head because I felt very bad. And then 3 or 4 days later, he called me into the office and he apologized for being harsh for the past 3 days. If you have beauty within, you can only show beauty. And he quoted the hadith of Rasulullah saying that ad-deenun nasiha. Deen is to have nasiha, to have goodwill, to offer advice, goodwill to Allah and His book and His messenger, and the believers, the leaders of the believers and the general populace. And from having goodwill towards the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is showing honor to the one who reads the book of Allah and studies the book of Allah. So the teacher needs to remind the student about the virtue of the Quran. The teacher needs to mold the heart of the student such that his heart doesn't become attached to dunya. He should turn his heart away from relying upon this dunya and being deceived by the dunya. The teacher should constantly remind the student that occupying himself with the study of the Quran and the religious sciences, al-ulum al-shar'iyyah, it is the way of the elect servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ibadillahi al-arifin. He should show care for the student. If the student is going through difficulty, the teacher goes through that difficulty with him. My neighbor in Strand used to be a Quran teacher, someone that loved the Quran, Imam Siraj Wallenberg, rahimahullah ta'ala. His student's pain was his pain. He used to often bring students home with him. The child is struggling, he can't learn his work. You bring the student home, let him sit in his house, let him learn with him, gives him food, gives him drinks. He has a pleasant stay. It's not a punishment. Coming home wasn't a punishment. It was helping him in actually overcoming the challenges that he's facing. That's concern and care. Many a teacher of the Quran today, it's about my job starts at 8 and my job ends at 1 and that's it. Beyond that, anything after those hours has nothing to do with me. I'm only being paid from 8 to 1. Like they say, I don't know how true this is, but they say, somebody said that in one of the masajid in Egypt, the mu'adhin comes in, he calls the adhan, beautiful adhan over the speakers, finishes the adhan, he leaves. They say, why did you make salah? He said, no, they only pay me to make the adhan. They don't pay me to make salah, they just pay me to make the adhan. So teachers are like that. They don't carry the student home with him. There's no care. No. A teacher that cares for his student observes when there's challenges and he intervenes. He visits at his home. He sees what the problem is. He communicates with parents. He's determined to make the child succeed in his study of the hifz of the Quran, whatever it may be. Many teachers today, they don't want to struggle with the student. In general, teachers today within our schools, they shifted that responsibility of caring for the student, of assisting the student, of helping the student, they shifted it to parents. Teachers give everything to parents these days. Right? It's like the child come home and the parent must teach him going from home. So what was the teacher doing? A true teacher of the Quran shows the same compassion towards his students that he shows to his own children. No. He's concerned for their welfare as the same concern that he has for the welfare of his own son, his own children. If the student displays bad conduct, he has patience towards the bad conduct of the student as how he has patience with the bad conduct of his own children. And then also he said that the student, the teacher of the Quran, must love for his student what he loves for himself. Must love for his student what he loves for himself. The Prophet ﷺ, he said that none of you can be a true believer until he loves for himself, for his brother what he loves for himself. Imam Nawawi's argument, if that is a general brother, then what about the student studying by him? Just think what our madrasas and schools would be like if teachers had these qualities. And some schools are like that. And some teachers are like that. I know of schools and institutions where the children prefer being at school than being at home. They don't want to be at home. They feel more loved at school. They receive more care at school. They feel more at home at school. So the school becomes their home. That's all they want to be. They love their teachers, they love their fellow students, they love the environment. So and it all ties again to the nafs, when the nafs is pure, and I have beauty that comes from me, beautiful character, beautiful ways, care for the students, compassion, love. Then we start creating positive environments. We create environments that gives birth to progress. Right? And it's so easy, subhanAllah. In the Mahabba Foundation, our program that we have in the Mahabba Foundation, especially in the early days of the Mahabba Foundation, many people would come to the programs and they would be attracted to remain there just because of the love that they experience between brothers. And love is a real thing. Brotherly love is a real thing. In fact, there's nothing like it. Brotherly love produces uns. Habib Muhammad, what did he say now? وَمَنْبَعُ الْأُنْسِ فِي الْأَيَّامِ خِلَّانُ. The source of tranquility, contentment, peace of heart in the days that go by are your brothers. Your brothers are a source of tranquility that you won't find elsewhere, not even in your home. No. So these are qualities that needs to come from us. And people feel it. I was speaking about the Mahabba Foundation because in the early days especially, love could be felt. So you find a place of belonging. And if you don't give people, and that's love that is based on what? On deen, on dhikr, on Quran, on masjid. If you don't give people the love that is a love of deen, they find it elsewhere. I mean, if you look at gangs, our youngster in a township can dedicate his life to a drug lord, to the point that he's willing to die for a drug lord. How does he get that? Because that drug lord gave him false love. Wasn't real. The drug lord made him think that he cares for him, but he doesn't care for him. That's the biggest lie. A drug lord caring for a gangster that he once must sell drugs for him and die for him and live a bad life for him and steal from his mother and steal from his father. But just because that youngster in the gang imagines he's been given a false lie that the drug lord cares for me, he's willing to give his life. If our young brothers within our societies find that same love here in the masjid, in our programs, in the Etiquettes, in the Mawlud, in the Burda, in the whatever it is, their allegiance will be to that love, and that love is connected to Allah and to His Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So these are the qualities a teacher should have. So when we aspire to become teachers, these are the qualities that we should have as teachers. And it should be the qualities that we look for within the teachers that we select and choose for our students. No. Allah grant us tawfiq. The Hizb al-Bahr. If I relate the story of the Hizb, what I wanted to mention about the Hizb al-Bahr was that serves as an example how our mashayikh, our teachers, the Sa'd al-Ba'alawi, they are not fixated on their way and their path, and how they were able to see khair and good in all ways and all paths, was the adoption of awrad and adhkar that doesn't even belong to the tariqah. Right? So we were speaking about not being rigid and only seeing khair in your group and not seeing khair anywhere else. in their tariqah, they have awrad and adhkar from other Sufi orders that they found to be beneficial and great and effective. And the Hizb al-Bahar is one such example. That's the point I wanted to make. And like that, there are many. Like that, there are many. Said Habib Umar, students that come from different Sufi paths, he doesn't allow them to take the path. They could be Naqshbandi, they should remain Naqshbandi, and he will make their tarbiyah on the way of the Naqshbandi. And if they are Shaduli, he'll make their tarbiyah on the way of the Shaduli. Because the objective is assisting the person to reach Allah and His Rasul. The objective is not how our group can become more. No. The objective is Allah and Allah's Rasul. And Dr. Bhuti is saying, when the nafs is not there, I become fixated only on me, and my tariqah, and my shaykh. And I don't even want somebody to go elsewhere. I'm not happy when you go elsewhere. And as crazy as that may sound to some of us, that's like a very sad reality that we witness in the world today. No. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala purify our souls and our hearts. Ameen ya Rab. Ameen ya Rab. Ameen ya Rab. Read the dua khatm al-majlis Sayyidis Gitina. ربنا انفعنا بما علمتنا رب علمنا الذي ينفعنا رب فقهنا وفقه أهلنا وقرابة لنا في ديننا مع أهل الكتر
وذكر رب وفقنا ووفقهم لما ترتضي قولا وفعلا كرما وارزق الكل حلالا دائما وأخل أتقياء علما نحظى بالخير ونكفى كل شر ربنا واصلح لنا كل الشؤون وأقر بالرضا منك العيون واقض عنا ربنا كل الديون قبل أن تأتينا رسل المنون واغفر استر أنت أكرم من ستر وصلاة الله تغشى المصطفى من إلى الحق دعانا والوفاء في كتاب فيه للناس الشفاء وعلى الآل الكرام الشرفاء وعلى الصحب المصابيح الغرر اللهم اهدنا بهداك واجعلنا ممن يسارع في رضاك ولا تولنا وليا سواك ولا تجعلنا ممن خالف أمرك وعصاك وحسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم يا ربنا اعترفنا بأننا اقترفنا وأننا أسرفنا على لظى أشرفنا فتب علينا توبة تغسل كل حوبة واستر لنا العورات وآمن الروعات واغفر لوالدينا ربي ومولودينا والأهل والإخوان وسائر الخلان وكل ذي محبة أو جيرة أو صحبة والمسلمين أجمع آمين ربي اسمع فضلا وجودا منا لا باكتساب منا بالمصطفى الرسول نحظى بكل سول بالمصطفى الرسول نحظى بكل سول بالمصطفى الرسول نحظى بكل سول صلى وسلم ربي عليه عد الحب وآله وصحبه عداد طش الصحب والحمد للإله في البدء والتناهي سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين في كل لحظة أبدا عدد خلقي ورضا نفسي وزنة عرشي ومداد كلماته.
Favored us with 1 week of Ramadan, it allows us to see the end of Ramadan. And that allowed us to be part of the Taraweeh and the Tahajjud and recite the Quran. And attending these classes of the Asr for the first week of Ramadan, may grant us consistency to continue in this way until the end of Ramadan. And maybe as the first 10 days are drawing to an end, may not come to an end save that we have attained Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy.
Amen.
And then the middle 10 days that we have attained Allah's forgiveness and that our necks are set free during the last 10 days. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with the intention that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through this month, and through our Quran in this month, and through our Taraweeh, and through this class of knowledge, that He rids our hearts from all evil, and from all darkness, and from all ailments, and from all sicknesses. And that He fills our heart with light and with nur, so that our heart, once purified, may reflect in our actions and our interactions and the way we conduct ourselves, such that we become like the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam inwardly and outwardly.
Amen.
That we speak the way He spoke and interact the way He interacted, and we become generous as how He was generous, and we become kind as how He was kind, and we become slaves of Allah as how He was a slave of Allah. هذه النوايا إيمان وسلم صالح وحسن رحمه الله إلى حضرة النبي.
اللهم صل وسلم وبارك عليه وعلى آله وصحبه الفاتحة.